Hello everyone, and welcome back to Morph of Dread. I imagine some of you are winding down for the night, while others might just be settling in after a long day. No matter where you are or what time it is, I'm thrilled to have you with me. If you enjoy the atmosphere here, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me bring you more stories. Now, let's get you settled, relax your mind, and let's dive into tonight's story. I've been working subway tunnel maintenance for the New York MTA for 11 years. In that time, I've learned to trust three things: my safety harness, my headlamp, and the track maps. The maps never lie. They can't. Every inch of tunnel, every junction, every emergency exit, every abandoned platform, it's all documented, cataloged, measured down to the centimeter. Has to be. When you're working 200 feet below street level in the dark, those maps are the difference between getting home and getting lost in 400 miles of tunnels that all look exactly the same. But there's one section on the J line, between Bowery and Canal, where my map doesn't match what I see anymore. And I still hear the sound of that platform door closing. It's been 4 months since we found it, and I still take the long way home to avoid the subway. My girlfriend asked me why I started driving to work when I used to take the train. I told her the traffic helps me think. I let her believe that. Because if I told her the truth, if I told her what's running on tracks that don't officially exist, she'd have to accept that there are places in this city that were built for purposes we're not supposed to know about. And I don't think she's ready for that. I don't think anyone is. Let me walk you through what happened. You need to understand why I'll never take the overnight maintenance shift again. My name's Marcus. I'm 36, certified in track inspection and tunnel structural assessment, and before this happened, I genuinely loved my job. There's something peaceful about working underground at 2 a.m. when the trains stop running. Just you, your crew, and miles of tunnel where the only sound is the drip of condensation and the distant rumble of trains on parallel lines. I've always been comfortable with isolation. I preferred it, actually. Down there, nobody's looking over your shoulder, nobody's rushing you. Just methodical, careful work. That night, it was me and two other guys. Tommy, who'd been doing this for 23 years and had the knee problems to prove it, and a newer guy named Chris who'd only been on the crew for 6 months. We were scheduled for a routine inspection of a quarter-mile stretch between stations, checking for track degradation, tunnel cracks, drainage issues, the usual. Simple 4-hour shift. And out. We entered through the access shaft at Bowery just after 2:15 a.m., the last train having cleared the section at 2:07. I remember checking my watch, noting it in the log. Force of habit. We descended the maintenance ladder, our headlamps cutting through the darkness, boots hitting the ballast with that familiar crunch. The smell hit me immediately, that specific subway tunnel combination of damp concrete, metal, and creosote. After 11 years, it was almost comforting. Tommy radioed dispatch to confirm we were on site. Standard protocol. Dispatch acknowledged, confirmed the power was cut to our section, gave us the all clear. We started our inspection heading south, toward Canal Street. The first 1,000 feet were completely routine. I checked rail fasteners while Chris inspected the drainage culverts and Tommy examined the tunnel wall integrity with his thermal camera, looking for water seepage behind the concrete. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from a crew that knows what they're doing. Every 15 minutes, Tommy would radio our position to dispatch. Everything by the book. We were approximately 1,800 feet in when I noticed the first thing that didn't match my map. There was a service alcove on the western wall that wasn't marked. Not a big deal on its own, the maps occasionally miss minor details, especially in older sections. But this alcove was deep, maybe 10 feet, and lined with glazed tile work that looked old. Not 1970s old. Not even 1950s old. The tile pattern was wrong, an Art Deco design that belonged to the original 1904 system, except this tunnel section wasn't built until 1968. I called Tommy over. He swept his light across the tiles, studying them with the kind of careful attention that comes from 2 decades underground. He ran his hand over the surface, feeling the texture. Probably salvaged materials from an older renovation, he said. Does that sometimes to save money. Reuses tile, fixtures, whatever's still good. It made sense. I accepted it. We moved on. But then, 200 feet further, we found another alcove. Identical tile work. Same vintage pattern. And this one had something the first didn't, a partially visible number painted on the wall in faded yellow paint. I could just make out 7-8 beneath decades of grime. I pulled out my track map and spread it against the tunnel wall, checking our position. According to the map, we were in a straight tunnel segment with no alcoves, no service areas, no marked infrastructure of any kind for another 600 feet. I checked it twice. The alcove we were standing next to didn't exist on paper. Tommy keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Maintenance Team 7. We're showing some infrastructure at our current position that's not on our section map. Can you confirm there's no documentation of service alcoves at? He checked his distance marker J127. There was a pause. Longer than usual. Then dispatch came back, their voice crackling through the radio with that specific static quality of signals traveling through hundreds of feet of concrete and earth. Team 7, our records show that section as standard tunnel. No noted alcoves. Probably just map revision lag. Make a note for the database update and continue your inspection. We continued. But I kept my map out, comparing what I was seeing to what was documented. And the discrepancies kept accumulating. At marker J132, we found old electrical conduit running along the ceiling that used cloth-wrapped wiring, the kind that hasn't been used since before World War II. But this tunnel was built in 1968. The wiring should have been modern PVC sheath cable. At J135, the tunnel wall changed. Not gradually, but at a distinct seam where newer concrete met much older masonry. The newer side matched the documented construction date. The older side looked like it had been there for a century. Kliss noticed it too. He ran his fingers along the seam, frowning. Why would they build new tunnel against old wall? Wouldn't they just tear it all out and start fresh? Tommy didn't answer right away. He was staring at something further ahead, his headlamp beam focused on a point in the darkness. His hand had gone still on his radio. Then he said, very quietly, "That's not on the map." I followed his light. Approximately 40 feet ahead, the tunnel opened up. Not into another tunnel junction, we weren't scheduled to hit an intersection for another quarter mile. This was something else. It was a platform. A full subway platform, with glazed tile walls, vintage globe light fixtures, and a curved ceiling done in the decorative style of the original IRT stations. But we were on the J line, which was never part of the IRT system. And according to my map, there was no station, active or abandoned, anywhere in this section. We approached slowly, our boots crunching on the ballast, the sound echoing strangely in the expanded space. As we got closer, more details emerged in our headlamp beams. The platform was immaculate. That was the first thing that struck me. In 11 years of working in abandoned stations and sealed-off platforms, I'd never seen one this clean. There should have been decades of dust, graffiti, water damage, the inevitable decay of neglected infrastructure. Instead, the tile gleamed. The brass fixtures were polished. The platform edge was clearly marked with fresh yellow safety paint. And there were benches. Wooden benches with ornate iron frames, the kind you see in photographs of the original subway system from the early 1900s. They sat in perfect rows along the platform, not a single one damaged or missing. Tommy keyed his radio again. His voice was steady, but I could hear the uncertainty underneath. Dispatch Team 7. We've encountered an undocumented platform at approximately marker J137, requesting information on any historical stations in this location. The radio crackled. Long pause. Then, Team 7, there are no documented stations between Bowery and Canal on your line. Can you describe what you're seeing? Tommy described it while I walked slowly along the trackside, my light sweeping across the platform. There was a tile mosaic on the far wall, a station name rendered in the classic font. But I couldn't read it from this angle. The letters were partially obscured by the platform's support columns. I climbed up onto the platform. The edge was exactly 2 feet 9 inches high, standard platform height, perfectly maintained. My boots hit polished concrete. No dust. No grime. It looked like it had been cleaned that day. Chris hauled himself up next to me, breathing hard. He pulled out his phone, trying to get a picture, but we were too deep for any signal. The screen showed no service in the corner. We need to see that station name, I said. We walked along the platform, our footsteps echoing with a strange quality, like the space was larger than it appeared. As we approached the mosaic, the letters became clear. The station was called Worth Street. I knew subway history. I'd studied it as part of my certification. Worth Street was a real station, one of the original 1904 City Hall loop stations that had been closed in 1962 and sealed off. It was on the Lexington Avenue line, miles from where we were standing. It definitely wasn't on the J line. And it definitely wasn't here, in a tunnel that wasn't even built until 6 years after Worth Street was officially decommissioned. Tommy had climbed up onto the platform now. He walked to the mosaic, running his hand over the letters, as if physical touch would make them make sense. This can't be Worth Street, he said. Worth Street is on the 6th line. We're on the J. I know, I said. Then why does it say Worth Street? I didn't have an answer. Chris had wandered toward the far end of the platform, where a tiled corridor led away into darkness. The kind of passage that would normally lead to stairs, to a mezzanine, to the surface. He called back to us, his voice echoing strangely. There's a tunnel here. Looks like it goes to another platform level. Don't, Tommy said immediately. We stay on task. Document what we see, report it, and let the brass figure it out. But Chris was young, curious, and I saw the exact moment he decided to take just a quick look. He stepped into the corridor before either of us could stop him. Tommy swore and started after him. I grabbed my camera and followed. The corridor was pristine. More of that flawless tile work, more polished brass fixtures. Emergency exit signs glowed with fresh paint, pointing toward stairs that descended into deeper darkness. But the stairs were wrong. They spiraled downward in a configuration I'd never seen in any subway station, turning back on themselves in a way that didn't match standard architecture. Chris's headlamp bobbed ahead of us, descending. Chris, get back here, Tommy called. That's an order. The headlamp stopped. Chris's voice drifted up, distorted by the spiral. You need to see this. We found him standing on a lower platform. Not a platform for trains, it was too narrow, and there were no tracks. It was more like a staging area, maybe 20 feet wide and 40 feet long. But what made us stop wasn't the space itself. It was what filled it. Wooden crates. Dozens of them, stacked along the walls in neat rows. They were old, the wood was dark with age, but the stenciled markings on the sides were sharp and clear. Numbers, dates, and a repeated symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with 3 lines radiating from the center. The dates on the crates ranged from 1943 to 1947. Tommy walked slowly along the rows, reading the labels. His hand was shaking slightly as he ran his light across them. "These are military shipping crates," he said quietly. "World War II era. This is government property." Why would government property from 1947 be in a subway platform that doesn't exist? Chris asked. That's when we noticed the smell. Faint, but distinct now that we were standing still. Not the usual underground smell of damp and mold. This was something else. Chemical. Like ozone mixed with something organic I couldn't identify. The temperature had changed too. It was warmer down here. Not uncomfortably so, but noticeably different from the ambient 50 degrees of the tunnel above. I pulled my Fluke thermal camera from my belt and swept it across the room. The screen showed the expected cool blues of concrete and tile. But there was something else, a heat signature coming from beyond the far wall. Not bright red like a heat source, but a diffuse yellow-orange that suggested warmth on the other side of the concrete. There shouldn't be anything beyond that wall but bedrock and soil. We were too deep, too far from any building basements or steam tunnels. Tommy saw what I was seeing on the screen. He'd gone very quiet. When he spoke, his voice was level, careful. "We're leaving. Right now. We document this, we report it, and we let someone else figure out what this is." I agreed. Chris started to protest, but Tommy cut him off with a look that said this wasn't a discussion. We turned to go back up the spiral stairs. That's when we heard the sound. It was distant at first. A rhythmic mechanical noise, like pneumatic doors. Then a hiss, like air pressure equalizing. The sounds were coming from somewhere deeper in the complex, because that's what this was, I realized. Not just a platform. A complex. Then came the footsteps. Multiple sets. Boots on concrete. Moving with purpose. Coming from the direction of the heat signature. We didn't run. You don't run in a dark subway tunnel unless you want to trip over track infrastructure and break your neck. But we moved fast, ascending those spiral stairs with our lights bouncing wildly off the walls. Behind us, the footsteps continued, getting closer. Tommy was in front, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite his bad knees. Chris was right behind him. I was rear guard and I made the mistake of looking back. My headlamp caught movement at the bottom of the stairs. Figures in dark clothing, maybe 3 or 4 of them. But before I could see any details, my light was met with a blindingly bright flashlight beam aimed directly at my eyes. A voice called up, sharp and commanding. "Stop where you are. This is a restricted area." "The hell it is," Tommy yelled back, not stopping. "We're empty maintenance. This is our tunnel." I didn't hear the response because we'd reached the main platform level. Tommy was already jumping down onto the tracks, Chris scrambling after him. I followed, my boots hitting the ballast hard, pain shooting through my ankles. We ran. You're not supposed to run in subway tunnels. There are too many obstacles, power rails, drainage culverts, and signal equipment. But we ran anyway, our lights jerking wildly, our breath coming hard. Behind us, I could hear pursuit. More footsteps on the platform, then hitting the ballast. Tommy was gasping into his radio between breaths. "Dispatch, unauthorized personnel, in tunnel." The radio crackled back, but I couldn't make out the words over the sound of our running and the echoes. We covered the 1,800 feet back to our entry point in what felt like seconds but must have been minutes. My lungs burned. My legs were shaking. But adrenaline is a hell of a thing. The access ladder appeared in our headlamp beams. Tommy went up first, his bad knees be damned, moving with the speed of pure fear. Chris followed. I grabbed the first rung and started climbing. Below me, I heard the footsteps stop. I looked down, gripping the ladder, my headlamp pointing downward into the tunnel. There were 5 of them. They'd stopped about 20 feet away, standing in a line across the tunnel. They wore dark coveralls with no identifying marks. No MTA logos. No contractor badges. Just blank dark clothing. And they were just standing there, watching us climb, making no move to follow. One of them raised a radio to his mouth. I saw his lips move but couldn't hear the words. Then the strangest thing happened. He lowered the radio, and he nodded at me. Not a threatening nod. Not a warning. Just a simple acknowledgement. Like we'd seen something we weren't supposed to see, and now there was a protocol that would be followed. I climbed faster. We emerged into the access shaft station at Bowery, all 3 of us breathing hard, covered in tunnel dust and sweat. The overnight station agent looked up from his phone, startled by our appearance. Before Tommy could say anything into his radio, it crackled to life. Team 7, this is dispatch. Be advised we've been informed of your accidental entry into a sealed historical preservation section. Please proceed to the supervisor's office at J Street for debriefing. Tommy stared at the radio. That's not what? Team 7, the voice cut him off. J Street. Immediately. A vehicle is being sent to your location. The vehicle arrived 10 minutes later. It wasn't an MTA supervisor's car. It was an unmarked black sedan with government plates. The man who got out wore a suit, not a uniform. He introduced himself only as Mr. Reeves. He asked us, very politely, to get in the car. He asked us, very politely, to leave our work phones and radios in the station agent's office. The drive to J Street was silent. Mr. Reeves didn't threaten us, didn't explain, just drove. At J Street, we were separated into different rooms. I sat alone for 40 minutes before Mr. Reeves came in with another man in a suit and a woman who identified herself as MTA legal counsel. What followed was 3 hours of debriefing. They asked me to describe exactly what we'd seen. I told them. They asked if I'd taken any photos. I hadn't, no signal that deep. They asked if I'd told anyone else. I said no. Then the legal counsel slid a document across the table. It was a non-disclosure agreement. Very specific language about sealed historical areas, preservation zones, and federal jurisdiction over certain infrastructure. She told me that what we'd encountered was a sealed section of the original 1904 subway system that had been repurposed during World War II for civil defense purposes. She said it was still classified as a secure government storage facility. She said our accidental entry had been noted and would be reported to the appropriate authorities, but no action would be taken against us provided we signed the NDA and never discussed what we'd seen. I asked about the people in the tunnel, the ones who'd chased us. She said they were federal security contractors conducting a routine inspection of the facility. She said we'd startled them as much as they'd startled us. I didn't believe her. The way they'd moved, the way they'd stopped and just watched us climb out, that wasn't startled. That was calculated. But I signed the document. So did Tommy. So did Chris. They drove us home in separate cars. Told us to take 3 days paid leave. Suggested we not discuss the incident with our families. That was 4 months ago. Here's what the official report says. Maintenance Team 7 accidentally entered a historically preserved section of tunnel during a routine inspection. No safety violations occurred. Incident closed. But here's what the report doesn't mention. 2 weeks after it happened, I went to the New York Public Library and pulled up historical records of the subway system. I spent 6 hours going through archived maps, construction documents, and news articles from the 1940s. Worth Street Station was real, but it was never on the J line, and it was sealed in 1962, 6 years before the tunnel we were working in was even built. According to every document I could find, that tunnel is a straight shot between Bowery and Canal with no platforms, no stations, no intersections. But I found something else. A single paragraph in a 1947 Times article about the expansion of civil defense infrastructure. It mentioned that certain unused subway infrastructure had been quietly repurposed for emergency government use. It didn't specify which stations. It didn't give details. But it confirmed that there were spaces below the city that served purposes beyond transportation. I went back 3 days later with a different question. I pulled up modern track maps of the entire system. I cross-referenced them with historical maps. I looked for other discrepancies, other sections where old and new didn't quite match. I found 7 separate sections across different lines where the documented tunnel construction dates don't align with the architectural features. 7 places where the maps might not show everything that's there. Last week, I was assigned to a maintenance inspection on the F line near East Broadway. Different tunnel, different borough. But when we got to our inspection section, I noticed something. There was a service alcove with Art Deco tile work. Faded yellow paint on the wall that might have been a number. The same chemical smell, faint but present. I didn't mention it to my crew. I documented our regular inspection and we moved on. But I've been thinking about that platform ever since. About those crates. About the heat signature beyond the wall. About the way those security contractors just stood there and watched us leave, like this was something that had happened before, like there was a procedure for it. I've been thinking about what might be stored in those crates from 1947. About what might require climate control and armed security 75 years later, hidden in tunnels that officially don't exist. I still take the train sometimes. Different lines, different routes. And sometimes, late at night when I'm sitting in an empty car and we're passing through a dark section of tunnel, I catch myself looking out the window into the blackness, wondering what we're passing above, or below, or next to. I transferred off the overnight maintenance shift. My supervisor asked why. I told him my girlfriend wanted me home at night. He accepted that. Because the real reason I won't work the deep tunnels after midnight anymore is that I've started noticing patterns in the way certain trains are scheduled. Routes that show gaps in service during specific hours. Sections of track that are marked for maintenance more frequently than others. Tunnels where the official documentation feels just slightly wrong. The city has been building infrastructure for over a century. Hundreds of miles of tunnel. Thousands of access points. Layer upon layer of construction, renovation, abandonment, and repurposing. And I don't think the maps show everything. I don't think they're supposed to. If I'm right about that, then somewhere under our feet right now, there's a whole parallel system running on schedules we're not allowed to see, serving purposes we're not supposed to know about. And every day, millions of people ride trains through the dark, never knowing what they're passing through.